So we already know that all the people over at the conscious community are lunatic psychos with poor logic and bad reasoning capabilities. We already know that. But do we know if the leader of the circus also has poor logic and poor reasoning capabilities? I'm not sure. SANETER, are you being willfully ignorant, or do you really have bad comprehension skills? I don't know. I'd like to think for the sake of argument that you're just being willfully ignorant. But perhaps really you do have bad logic. Perhaps really you do have bad reasoning skills. Which is sad because you're 50-some years old and you still can't figure it out. With that being said, man, on SANETER's channel recently, he's been asking what he feels like is a gotcha question to Christians and Hebrew Israelites. Now, of course, Chambo, I too agree that Hebrew Israelites and Christians and Muslims are all fucking crazy lunatics. But let's make sure that we destroy their position with sound logic and reasoning, or we just make ourselves as fucking shitty as them. There are plenty of ways to do this without resorting to pseudo-nonsensical attacks. So, what is the question that Sa's been asking? It goes like this. The first thing he does is he asks his guest, does God know everything? And of course, God is all-knowing, so the answer to that question is yes. The next thing he does is he asks, does God know that a baby in the womb will grow up to be a homosexual or a lesbian? Of course, because God is all-knowing and he knows everything, the answer is yes. From this, though, he will make the leap or the jump that therefore God put evil into the world. Now, let's get into why this is a huge mistake and a huge error in logic. First of all, Sa, it's important to point out that evil is not a thing. It's not a thing like a rock or a leaf. For example, you can't have a jar full of evil. Evil has no existence on its own. Evil is simply the absence of good. Similarly, holes are real, but they only exist in something. We call the absence of dirt a hole, but it cannot be separated from the dirt. When God created the world, he created potentiality and free will. People have the ability to freely choose good or to reject good, which again, anything that is separate from God or separate from his righteous moral standard of goodness is evil. If I asked a person, does cold exist? More than likely they would say, yes, cold does exist. But the answer is actually no, cold does not exist. Cold is the absence of heat. Similarly, darkness does not exist. Darkness is just the absence of light. Evil, too, is the absence of good, or better, evil is the absence of God. God did not create evil, but rather necessarily allowed for the absence of good to exist. God allowed people to make their own choices. So in Isaiah 45:7, when God says, I form the light, I create the darkness, I make peace, and I create evil, God is saying he creates the potential for evil to exist by allowing a world with free will. And in a world with free will, some people will choose the wrong path, a path void of righteousness. The true God of the universe has no evil in him at all. He is all good and all righteous. Righteousness exists as part of his nature and as part of his being, the same way objective morality does. When someone deviates from this standard, it can be said that they are doing evil. Sa, I got something for you, man. I posted this comment actually underneath one of the videos you had on your channel. I think because you got scared, you probably deleted it. But let me tell you something, man. Imagine you were the head coach of the New York Giants, and you were all-knowing. You knew everything. So you knew ahead of time if one of your players was going to fumble the ball away in the Super Bowl at a critical moment in time and lose you the game. Should you keep that player out of the game, or should you still let him play? The answer is, if you're righteous, just, and fair, you still have to put him in. It would be cheating to take him out, and you would have ruined the fairness of the game. It's no longer an even contest because you would have altered the outcome. So even though you know how it all plays out, in fairness, you still have to let it fucking play out. You can't just put your hand in the game and meddle around and create your own narrative or start tweaking causes to get your own desired effect. You have to allow that player to go in the game and make whatever mistake he's going to make. The same way God created a universe with free will and couldn't then start preventing free will by killing all the babies in the womb who he later knew would grow up and fumble away their righteousness. You got to let it play out, man. You got to let people choose their own path. So again, God did not create evil or put evil into the world, but he does allow for people to freely choose to deviate from righteousness on their own accord. And that is what we call evil. Lastly, if God prevented homosexuals or lesbians from coming into the world, and you said those were evil, he would also have to prevent all the evil. He'd have to prevent all the liars and thieves and rapists and murderers and pedophiles, etc., from coming into the world. He would have had to prevent all the bad people from coming in. But then the universe is no longer free. And essentially what you've done is eliminated free will altogether. The only people left on the planet would be those who can choose good or who would do good. If God had not allowed for the possibility of evil to exist, mankind would be serving God out of obligation, not out of choice. God did not want to create robots. You can't reward your children if you program them to only do good. You would only be able to reward yourself for being the creator of the program. So at the end of the day, God gives people the choice. God gives us all the choice to be good or to stray away from good. People have the choice to choose their own path. That does not mean, that God put evil in the world. Evil is not a thing. Evil is the absence of God. I'm the Atheist Killer, man. Check out Theistic Essentialism online, and I'll see you soon, bro. Peace.